and Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke, from likely Republican to lean Republican. Chris Direwalt is Fox News politics editor and the editor of Halftime Report. Earlier this week, Colin Reed, who is at Definers Group, he said that Texas is always fool's gold for Democrats, that Ted Cruz is going to win this going away. But why this change today by Cook Political Report?
Well, I think it's adorable that they did that. The Halftime Report, the Fox News power rankings moved that race 6 weeks ago.
No. Yeah, it was a while ago.
Many moons ago we do that. But I think it's adorable that they're catching it. No, I'm kidding. The Cook Political Report.
Yeah, that was very unlike you.
The Cook Political Report does great work. I'm just teasing.
They're just catching up to you.
This is something that we have known for a while. Now, look, I think that Cruz's numbers are artificially suppressed by the fact that there are a lot of conservatives in Texas, or not even conservatives, Trump, MAGA 3000 people in Texas who still resent Cruz for his diffidence during the closing weeks of the Republican nominating process. I don't think those are Beto O'Rourke voters.
Right.
And I think that as you move into the midterm, there's some artificial suppression of Cruz's numbers. All of that having been said, you can't take anything away from the phenomenon that is Beto O'Rourke. The guy's fundraising. He's a natural politician. He is gifted at this. He is the antithesis of Cruz. Cruz is a bad retail politician who matches up on the issues for the electorate. O'Rourke doesn't match up on the issues with the electorate, but he is a fantastic retail politician, and Texans are responding well to him.
And, okay, so we'll keep an eye on that one. I wanted to ask you about this memo that was put out today by Priorities USA, talking about the troubles facing the president. Okay, this is from their perspective. They have a poll that says unfavorable views of the president include temperament. 53% are unhappy there. Dealings with Russia, 48% unhappy there. And truthfulness, 47%. What do you make of this messaging from this Democratic group that is saying, like, he's got problems and we're after him on that?
Well, and this we should point out is on the heels of the same group previously telling Democrats, don't get high on your own supply, okay? Like, this is going to be a tougher year than you thought. This is going to be more challenging than you think. Now they're saying, okay, and here's where Trump's vulnerabilities are. Now, on the second two numbers, when it comes to, truthfulness
and dealings with Russia.
And dealings with Russia, that's just basically a reflection of partisanship. That's
it's 48%, 47%.
That's a reflection. But it's that first number that is significant. And that's where the Republicans stand to suffer badly. And that is Trump's exposure in 2020, which is that for a lot, we've never seen the gender gap worse. Republicans have never done worse with women throughout the annals of public polling. So in 60 or 70 years, it's never been this bad. And a lot of that has to do with the president's temperament. And a lot of that has to do with those things. House Republicans want to benefit from the president on the economy. They want to benefit from the president on other issues. They want to benefit with male voters. But in swing districts, especially in suburbs, what are you going to do? And that top number is of consequence.
Well, Dan Henninger wrote about this yesterday. He's a Wall Street Journal editorial page, and he's a columnist there. And he wrote this: a message to Republicans lost in the Trump funhouse. Run on something solid. Run on something you understand. Join yourself at the hip with the greatest accomplishment of Donald Trump's presidency. Run on America's booming economy. And over again, we see that a lot of the ads are not about the economy. Is it just hard because you don't gin up a lot of enthusiasm if you're just talking about the good news? You have to have the negativity to try to get people to come out to vote?
Fear and hate are more powerful motivators than our optimism. And if you tell people that the economy is good, if you tell Republicans that the economy is good, of course, they might not feel as terrified as you want them to be terrified of. So they want to talk about impeachment. They want to talk about the national anthem. They want to talk about immigration and the wall. They want to talk about things that get a limbic, visceral response from voters so that they will go out. Because the Democrats already have that. Donald Trump is that. And
how are the Democrats going to run against the president on the economy? Are they just going to ignore it?
Well, what they're going to do is they're going to run against the president. They're going to run against the president as his attitude and all of those things. Then what they're going to do is talk about health insurance and how the Republicans fumbled the ball on the 1 yard line on Obamacare. And they're going to keep revisiting that every day until the election. And it's going to hurt them in a lot of places.
We don't have time to talk about it, but Act Blue, which is a Democratic fundraising effort, to date for this election alone, they've raised $1 billion. That's a lot of money?
Even in New York, that's a lot of money.
Money doesn't mean everything, of course. All right, Chris Direwalt, thank you.
You bet.
Here's a look at the primaries next Tuesday. Voters in Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington will head to the polls. There's also a special election in Ohio for a House seat on that day. A 12-year-old Chinese girl here with a student tour was abducted from Reagan National Airport. We're going to tell you about the search. Plus, the administration presenting a united front on election meddling, but is the president undercutting their message? Fox News alert on a 12-year-old girl from China who was apparently abducted at Reagan National Airport in Washington. Ma Jingjing was in the United States with a student tour group. Police say she excused herself to go to the bathroom Thursday after getting her passport. Authorities believe she met a woman, Asian woman, in a black dress who helped her change clothes. Police say the two then left the airport and got into this vehicle. It has New York license plates. Police issued an Amber Alert warning that Jingjing is believed to be in extreme danger.
The intelligence community and all of its agencies are postured to identify threats of all kinds against the United States. The President has specifically directed us to make the matter of the election meddling and securing our election process a top priority, and we have done that and are doing that and will continue to do so.
That was Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats speaking yesterday at the White House, presenting a united front with the heads of 5 departments taking to the podium to affirm the United States' commitment to combating election meddling. The 5 department heads all say Russia was behind an effort to interfere in the 2016 elections and that Russia is attempting to do the same in the 2018 elections. This, as a bipartisan group of senators propose a bill to impose new sanctions on Russia in response. Joining me now is Republican Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. What do you make of these sanctions, and do you think they will be punishment enough to get Russia to stop its behavior?
I'm not sure if it's going to be punishment enough, but I think it's essential because basically what we want to show, anytime Vladimir Putin decides to do something, he runs kind of a cost-benefit analysis. Here's the potential cost, here's the potential benefit. The benefit he sees in all of this, whether it's with us or any of our allies, is trying to undermine democracy. So he's playing this long game. He wants people to not have faith in the voting system. Because if you think about it, if people don't have faith that their vote actually counts, that's the biggest thing to undermine the stability of this country. So I think every time we know that the Russians are involved in any kind of election meddling, it is essential on us to impose strict sanctions on them because we want the cost to begin to outweigh that benefit.
Yesterday, there was that press conference at the White House in the Brady briefing room. Unprecedented, as far as I can see it, especially in the last couple of years. But yet, some Democrats and some in the media are saying, but yet the president won't say it himself. He will not say that Russia meddled in the election and just be just clean and clear about it. Do you think that that would make any difference if the president actually said it himself?
I don't think it'll make any difference with some members of the press. I think the president has said it. I, have kind of wondered why he wasn't more clear in how he says it. And I think what it really comes down to is he has this feeling that there are people that are blaming the Russians for his election. And if you actually look at what the Russians did in 2016, you talk about the Facebook ads, you look at what they actually spent on it, there's no doubt that the Russians did not elect President Trump. He won on his message. But I think it would behoove him and behoove our country to be very clear about this and to talk about the threats that are occurring now. Yesterday was a great step. I think the president's been clear about it, but he's definitely not going to satiate some members of the media who want to just kind of make this an issue.
Well, sometimes if you want the media to make a pivot, you have to help them by the hand and get them to do it. I wanted to ask you about what's happening with Turkey and Erdogan, and that our government is finally getting really tough on Turkey, in particular for Pastor Brunson, who is now being held on house arrest. Secretary of State Pompeo said today Brunson needs to come home, as do all the Americans being held by the Turkish government. It's pretty straightforward. Pastor Brunson is an innocent pastor, and they need to let him return to the United States. Sanctions, will that be effective with Erdogan?
I think it'll start. We actually have a package, I think, of sanctions, from what I understand the administration does, ready to go in follow-up. The Turkish lira has taken a massive hit because of this. And I think this is a great maneuver, both by the president and the secretary, because it says we're not going to leave Americans behind. This pastor is being held as a bargaining chip. And Erdogan himself said, democracy is like a streetcar. You ride it until the stop you want to get off at. And he has gotten off at that stop. And it is time for us, with a fellow NATO ally, to call them out for their misbehavior. And they have been acting terribly, both to us, to Israel. And it's time to show some spine. I'm very proud of the president for doing it.
All right, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, have a good weekend. Thank you.
You too. See ya.
We've got some good economic news out of the Labor Department. We'll tell you about that. Plus, Tennessee voters setting the stage for November with yesterday's primary. We'll tell you about the big winners.
This is where America turns, and this is who America trusts. At a critical time for the country, the polls show the people put their trust in Fox News Channel. MSNBC and CNN don't even come close. Real news, real honest opinion. Americans put their trust in Fox News Channel.
Alert. Let's talk. Wall Street reacting as the Labor Department releases new jobs numbers today. The economy added 150,000 new jobs in July, continuing a streak of 84 straight months of gains. Unemployment falling slightly to 3.9%. The market's mostly up today on the news, and I'm joined now by Susan Lee from the Fox Business Network. That was fun. Good news today for the economy, for the American people.
That's right. So a little bit less than what economists had expected for the month, but still pretty strong, especially when you couple that with revisions upwards in June and May of 59,000 as well. So, you know, we've had 19 million jobs created in the last 8 years. And on top of that, don't forget the jobless rate ticked down. Wages went up. So things are going pretty well.
And that's usually what you would expect to happen, right? As the unemployment rate goes down, wages should go up. But people think they should be going up faster?
Yeah, they should be going up faster. But nominal GDP, this is like a technical term, but nominal GDP, you know, we only crossed 4% just recently, right? Still the strongest since 2014. But, you know, we're not back to those days before the financial crisis where the economy is roaring ahead. Right. So that's why wages are not growing as
fast. And tell me about China's, again, threatening more tariffs on goods?
Yeah, that's right. So $60 billion. They can't match us dollar for dollar since we don't export or import as many Chinese goods, right? So they're going two-fifths each. But, you know, people say, the economists say that the U.S. has the upper hand when it comes to China, since, you know, they depend more on the U.S. than China depends, or the U.S. depends on China. So, you know, this is the way to go. But I want to point out what Tim Cook said this week. This is important because this is the largest company in the world, right? $1 trillion in market cap. Apple. He says his view on tariffs and the company's view on tariffs is that it shows up as a tax on the consumer and results in hurting the American economy, lowering economic growth.
And do you buy that?
I do, in the end, because the consumers do pay it. I mean, you know, the companies still need to make profits somehow, right? They're going to raise prices on you and me, so we end up paying more.
And how quickly might consumers feel it?
I would say probably in a few months. There's still a lag time when people think about, you know, how much to raise prices, but companies are already cutting their spending, so that does impact the economy. You've seen that with the Federal Reserve Central Bank, who says that sentiment has gone down for companies. They're not spending as much because they're concerned they have to pay more tariffs and higher prices.
Interesting. Well, I always love learning from you. Thank you, Susan.
Me too.
We appreciate it. And the results are in for the primaries in Tennessee. The Senate race is down to 2, and the Republican gubernatorial candidate was chosen. Steve Harrigan is in Chattanooga, a great place, by the way. Steve, any surprises last night?
Dana, a big upset by Bill Lee. He will be the Republican nominee for governor. He's really been an outsider, no political experience, a businessman. He took a tractor to all 95 counties in Tennessee. He had about 100 town halls, and really a very different, simple message. Just good schools, good families, support for President Trump. He beat people like Diane Black, who was favored to win. She had an endorsement from the vice president, spent $12 million of her own money for naught. Here's Lee.
My message is very simple. Tennessee is a very good place to live. It is a very good place to work. It is a very good place to raise our families. But as good as Tennessee is, it can be even better.
Towards the end of the campaign, when Lee started to surge, the other 3 candidates all hit him with attack ads. Lee did not respond in kind. He stayed positive, and it worked for him.
That's amazing. All right, and it seems like the Senate primaries turned out as expected. But can a Democrat win in Tennessee?
Very much as expected, and the Democrats think they have a chance this time with Phil Bredesen, a popular, moderate former governor. It's been 28 years back to Al Gore in 1990 to send a Democrat to the Senate from Tennessee, but they think they have a chance this time around. Bredesen will be facing Marsha Blackburn. She's an 8-term congresswoman. She backs President Trump, calls herself a card-carrying, hardline conservative. Trump has been down here to campaign with her. He's likely to be down again in a race that could really decide control of the Senate. Dana, back to you.
It's amazing. Okay, we'll keep in touch with you. Thank you, Steve. The midterm election's coming closer, and it seems Republicans are facing an uphill battle. Bruce Mehlman is a former Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Technology and Policy and the founder of Mehlman, Castanetti, Rosen, and Thomas. That's a lot of titles there, Bruce. There's a lot of titles. I'm glad you're here. You have looked at this analysis, and you note that 5 of the last 6 elections have been what you call, and people that are pros like you call, change elections. Why is that?
Well, there are a lot of possibilities, but my best guess is the same reason you saw the Brexit in the UK, the same reason you saw folks like Macron elected in France. Around the world, voters are afraid of the future, and they're not getting what they want, what they expect from sitting politicians, so they're voting for change. And the parties that are in are not delivering with the same old policies, given that our economy has moved to a new place.
We talk a lot about politics here on this show. What is the best case for Republicans? Like, why should they believe that they'll be doing well in this year's midterms? Well,
number 1, maybe 2, and 3 is the economy. The economy is white hot, great GDP numbers in Q2. A lot of folks are forecasting great Q3, with tariffs being the only dark lining in the silver cloud there. The map's a terrific map for the Republicans to defend and possibly grow in the Senate. And while the House is going to be tough, there are fewer toss-up seats than many other years. Plus the opposition, the Dems, with some frequency, instead of talking about areas where they may be very successful, like family separation, they go to abolish ICE. And their tendency to overplay their hand is a hope for the Republicans. And yet in this last week, we've seen many people say that they do believe that the Democrats could at least win the House. What's the best message for Democrats, and why do they think that they could win? Well, you correctly point out history. History is the number one thing. 5 of the last 6 elections were change elections. Every midterm this century has been either a Senate or a House flip. They're doing great in all of the so-called wave indicators, things that historically would indicate you have a wave coming. So on the generic ballot, would you rather Democrats or Republicans control? They've got very high numbers, times double digits, but high single digits. In fact, Bruce, we have that generic ballot just to put up here on the screen. I won't tell you everything about what will happen. And we've seen double-digit increases by the or double-digit leads by the Democrats, but also it's also gone down to low single digits. But now I guess we're getting a little closer to the election, and maybe that'll be what it is. Why do you think that Democrats might actually do better in the Senate than others? Well, so in doing our most recent analysis, I was pretty sure the Senate was going to be bad news for the Democrats. But when you go back and look at the last 10 midterm elections, there were 333 Senate contests. And what you found is the single best predictor if you're going to win is whether you're in a state, whether you are out of the White House, whether your party doesn't hold the White House. So in this case, the Democrats, even if you're in a state the president won, the last 23 elections in a state the president won by less than 10, all 23 of the out-party incumbents won. And even in states such as West Virginia, let's say, where you're in a state the president won by more than 10, 39 of 43 defending out-party Senate incumbents won. I know that that analysis was picked up by a lot of people because I think it surprised some folks. You have a note here about party unity behind a president historically, with President Donald Trump being really high. George W. Bush, of course, was at 96%. I think that largely had to do, obviously, with leadership, but the country was at war, and it was right after 9/11. But his numbers are very high. And one of the things that you write is that it's Trump's party. He can tweet if he wants to. Why is that? Well, we were a little surprised by that, but I think it's a couple of things. First, each of the 3 factions of the Republican Party is getting what they want. So evangelical conservatives are thrilled with Brett Kavanaugh as a nominee. They were thrilled with Neil Gorsuch and extraordinary appointments to the court the president's making. Traditional establishment Republicans, probably like myself, were pleased with the first-in-a-generation tax reform as well as deregulation. And this kind of new wave of populist MAGA Republicans, like the fights with the media, like the anti-elitist anti-politically correct rhetoric. Beyond all that, though, Dana, and you're feeling this too, we're in an era of great tribalism. And I don't mean great in a good way. I mean great in a large magnitude way. And we rally around our guys and they rally around theirs. Bruce, I want to have you back next week because you have some additional things that are really interesting about just demographics, the age and the makeup of these parties and how it is changing. So that's a tease for next week if we could have you back. I appreciate the invitation. Thanks for having me today. All right, Bruce. Thank you. NASA set to return to space, why the upcoming missions are a very big deal, plus the Trump administration and the ACLU squaring off again over immigration, why they are heading to court. Up next.
A supreme decision facing President Trump as he weighs candidates for the highest court in the land. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing.
Shepard Smith on the Fox News deck. We're waiting for a news conference live at the top of the hour from Lynchburg, Virginia, where engineers have been working to stabilize a dam after heavy rains caused it to overflow. The National Weather Service reports that if that dam fails, the surrounding area could be under 17 feet of water in 7 minutes. We'll have the live update as the stabilization process is underway now. We'll hear from the local officials, top of the hour, on Shepard Smith Reporting.
NASA announcing crews for the first manned space flight since the shuttle was retired 7 years ago. NASA is planning to test flights using 2 different spacecraft built by Boeing and SpaceX. There is also a planned trip to the International Space Station. American astronauts have had to fly on Russian rockets since the shuttle program ended. The test flights will take place next year. A new battle shaping up over immigration. The Trump administration and the ACLU now at odds over who bears responsibility for finding parents who were deported after being separated from their children at the U.S.-Mexico border. Now it's up to a federal judge to decide. Marianne Rafferty is live in Los Angeles. Marianne.
Hi, Dana. Well, when it comes to getting those separated families back together, the Trump administration is calling on the ACLU to take the lead and use its resources to help speed up the process. But the ACLU wants just the opposite. In court papers filed yesterday, the ACLU outlined its assertion that it's the government's responsibility to get hundreds of separated children back into the arms of their parents who came to the country illegally, saying they hope, quote, that the government will take significant and prompt steps to find the parents on their own. Now, to this point, the ACLU says its network of charity agencies might be helpful with the reunifications if the government provided more information, such as a parent's phone number or addresses of any relatives, whether living inside or outside the U.S., whether the child or parent speaks a foreign language, as well as any other information that might point to where a deported parent could be located. But to this point, the ACLU says the information provided by the government is either non-existent or it's incomplete, which makes the process of facilitating those reunions more difficult. The Trump administration, though, putting the burden back on the ACLU, pointing out that the agency has vast resources in countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to help with this tedious process of trying to reunite the families. Meanwhile, the U.S. Justice Department has started talks with foreign governments on how the administration may be able to assist with efforts, but the ACLU has sued on behalf of parents on a decision of how to solve some of these complex issues. Getting families back together at the border now expected to come down to a U.S. district judge who has ordered 2,500 children reunited with their loved ones. A conference call with the court is scheduled for later today. Dana?
All right, Marianne, thank you for the update. Goats on the loose, eating everything in sight in one neighborhood. Where they came from, next. A neighborhood in Boise, Idaho is again goat-free after more than 100 of them descended on the area, munching on landscaping. It turns out the goats belong to a company called We Rent Goats that hires them to help out clear weeds, which cuts the chances of wildfires spreading. The herd wandered away from a nearby job, and it took the company about an hour and a half to get all the wayward goats rounded up. Former WWE wrestler Glenn Jacobs, better known by his in-ring name, Kane, was elected last night to be the next mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. The 50-year-old political novice defeating Democrat Linda Haney after winning the Republican primary by just 23 votes back in May. So congratulations to him. A new link discovered between drinking and dementia. Turns out light drinking may help prevent the symptoms of brain disease, while drinking no alcohol at all is just as bad as drinking too much. A study in the British Medical Journal finding moderate drinking helps stimulate the brain system for getting rid of toxins. However, it may not be so good for other parts of the body, like your liver. Spike is up next with some tips for how to beat the heat with your pet, and he'll have a special guest, we hope.
It's
This is where America turns, and this is who America trusts. At a critical time for the country, the poll show the people put their trust in Fox News Channel. MSNBC and CNN don't even come close. Real news, real honest opinion. Americans put their trust in Fox News Channel.
Hot weather breaking out across the country. Rick Muth joins me now. Rick, I understand this is a big heat wave.
Yeah, it's been so hot across the West. We've been seeing some of these fires. In fact, I don't know if we have any of the video of that tornado, that fire tornado that was in across parts of California yesterday. Where the fires have obviously been the story. It is a little bit cooler right now. You notice that 66 in San Francisco, obviously that's along the coast, but it's still warm across interior sections, 102 in Phoenix. We had that amazing dust storm that moved through Phoenix yesterday as well, one of the biggest that we've seen in a very long time across that area. Take a look at this. So we have elevated fire danger again. Redding, where that car fire is going on, they're getting some control on it, but still a very strong, incredibly destructive fire. And you can see now our elevated fire danger goes up across parts of Montana and throughout Idaho and over across parts of Wyoming as well. So a very big stretch here of areas of the West. A lot of wind with this, but temperature-wise coming down just a little bit. We were up around that 110 mark in Redding with the fire going on. You'll notice here things cooling down a little bit. Same goes for up across parts of Oregon where temperatures have been well above average. We're still very hot though. 119 for a high tomorrow in Death Valley and 111 in Phoenix. You get the idea. The heat still continues here. But we have this little bit of a break. Next week, we see the heat come back in. So we're going to see these temps probably go up by about another 15 degrees. So we've got at least a weekend here to get some of the fires under control, if they can at all. And then the conditions build back in. Here's what it looks like, though, through Monday, Tuesday. We're watching all that monsoon activity, big storms across parts of Arizona. That's going to die down just a little bit, but we'll have some pretty big rain showers here across parts of Colorado and New Mexico, maybe even just a little bit of localized flooding and some severe weather as well. Dana.
But, Rick, if you go over to the East Coast of the country, there are dramatic floods. In fact, Chef Smith just said at the top of